I welcome Mark Fitzpatrick and Andrew Arps to the table for this conversation around the soil conservation and regeneration, the SCAR project in North Canterbury. One of those exciting things that I think for a number of our new councillors who talk about actions on the ground, things that can be achieved. This is one of the things that came out of the Haranui Kaikoura earthquake. Something that's absolutely on the ground, achieving really good outcomes, and for me a bit of a template for what could be in the future going forward as we hopefully move into outcome-based things. So over to you, whoever, for your introductions and
tēnā koutou katoa. No ko te rana mea airihi a ka tupuna, ko te kapa moana te moana, ko rangitautau te maunga, ko Otatahi tōku kanga. Ko Mark Fitzpatrick tōku ingoa, tēnā koutou katoa. Actually, it's very nice to meet you. It's my first time being here. I'm Mark Fitzpatrick. I'm the new manager of Water and Land. I've been here about 5 weeks, and it's a real pleasure to be able to come to you guys today with this program. The question around non-regulatory work that the council engages in, and this is a really good example of that. So hopefully it inspires some good conversation, and I'll hand over to Andrew who can take from there. Kia ora.
More than lead in the water and land section, obviously. For a number of you, I know, and you know me, and you know the program, and for others to a degree, the program and myself will probably be a little bit like a first-time caller from North Canterbury. But so what we'll do on that basis is the intent today is to explain where this program fits in the relationship with the council, bring that into some context of the program, and then to take a look at what we're delivering and a little bit of a sneak and look at the future for the program. So. Let me look at a slide here, and this is looking at the context for the water for the environmental regulation and protection, one of our core services. So this program fits within that service. SCAR is part of our local action delivery and is delivered by staff in our water and land section who are part of the wider operations group. As far as reporting goes, whilst we do reporting through to the annual plan and things around outcome measures, this program per se, in terms of the work that we do on the ground, is not reported on. However, the satisfaction level around the contestable fund aspect of it is reported in, so it's not fully reported into the reporting measures. And there at the bottom, as far as where it fits in terms of the longer term aspirations of the council, you'll see those highlighted with those circles in that area. So what the program matters? Well, in essence, erosion is an upstream issue and a driver is an upstream driver of downstream issues. So once soil is lost from the land, that means it gets into the waterways, into habitats, and starts to cause issues downstream. So obviously, managing that erosion at source is both good for protecting the productive land as well as also water, particularly over the long term. So that, as such, is the problem that this program addresses. This program, or in fact the work that Water and Land does, and as was mentioned just before, complements the regulatory work and what we're doing is scale. And the SCAR model, as you'll see as we work through this, is a really good example of that delivery model, and in particular the fact that it's partnership-led. I'll go into further depth on that, but involves MPI, ourselves, and also the landowners. It's place-based and it's outcome-focused. Another great thing about the program is that while it's focused obviously on soil conservation, it actually has the multiple outcomes, and from everything from obviously water quality, biodiversity, resilience, as well as the business community. You'll hear me, okay, I'll say this a little bit later, but it has opened a lot of gates for us in terms of working and building relationships and building trust in the community, and that's enabled us to then deliver on a number of other priorities for the council and the landowners. So when we actually look at what is SCAR, and John just mentioned on this a little bit before, it was established in 20 earthquake era, and as I said earlier, was designed as that sort of co-funded model. It started out for the obvious reasons in that period of time, focused on Hiranui and Kaikoura. It then grew a bit into the foothills of Waimakariri, and then in the last year, we've also been doing a pilot on Banks Peninsula. So it's something that's grown. There's still a real need, and there's still a lot of work to be done. That photo there, just so you know what that is, because it just looks like sticks on a hill, which it kind of is the pole planting on a hillside, or space planting as it's called, with poplars. As far as the program goes, it's a multi-tool program, and obviously a lot of technical advice. There's financial support, because the likes of the poplar, there's a degree that we fund those, but the landowners still actually pay for them, so it's more of a contribution towards them. And a big part of it is practical on-farm action that we want to support people with. In that advice, we do land use capability mapping. So what that's about is mapping a farm and actually pointing out that there's a different classes of land from 1 through to 9, and actually, and the reason for that, or the purpose of that, is so that the farmers can actually manage their farms and the land use and the soil. The space planning, which we looked at, but then also another big part of the program was also the reversion of areas. Training and engagement is a really big part of the program, particularly that engagement piece. I've already said it once, but I don't mind saying it twice, is that the amount of gaps has opened for us to build the trust in the community and then move on to other, supporting them for other environmental good has been a huge aspect of this program we've now been going for 6.5 years, and we're in the second of 2 4-year funding periods. Okay. So to look at it by the numbers, what we've got here is that, all of these top numbers are to date. The one at the bottom is actually for the whole of the funding period. I'll clarify that in a moment. But we put in around 25,000 poplar poles across 164 farms. Hectares of land has been retired. There's over 100,000 hectares of land has had the land use capability maps produced for them. There was around 230 farms engaged in the program. Remembering they plan this out over time, so it's not all the work is done in 1 year. It's a progressive thing with these farms. So these are, from my old world, shall we say, repeat customers. Yeah. And then also, and this has been a bit of a focus the last couple of years, we've established 15 on-site nurseries for poplar poles. So that not only obviously helps with our production of poplar poles, but it's also about building capability and capacity in the community, so that those nurseries, they feed that local community or catchment in terms of the poplar poles. The program, once we get to the end of the second 4-year period, we'll have had a total investment of $10 million. Now that's equal funding between the 3 parties. So just to put that into perspective, what that means on a per annum basis, that means that each of the parties, and it varies slightly, but it's sort of rounded figures, are putting around about $460,000 per annum. In our case, for Environment Canterbury, a little over 40% of that is contributed in kind, which means it's more of a figure of around $265,000 in actual cash from us that goes into the program. again, putting that into perspective of what it means for every dollar of cash that Environment Canterbury puts in the mix, that actually activates around $4.50 worth of investment in the program. So from that perspective, it's a good return that is really making a difference. Momentum, building trust and building those relationships. This is kind of a word of mouth approach. There was a little bit of marketing and brochures, but very little. But most of it was done through word of mouth and knocking on the farm gates. And then that built into, it was we scaled up with poplar poles and then probably more, and also land use capability maps. And then over the last wee while, there's been certainly more retirement of land. In fact, just to put that in perspective again, if we now look at land use capability maps, the nurseries, and the actual poplar pole subsidy that we provide, that comes to around $500,000 per year. But the actual land that was is being retired has now got a value of about $600,000. So if you like, the pure biodiversity aspect of it is probably a bigger part of the mix, and that's an aspect that's actually grown over the years. But everything that you see is, shall we say, reflects a really strong and mature work program that is working really well, not just for us but also for the community. Obviously, that last photo was of one of the poplar nurseries that we've got. So if it really does come down to that, why is this program working? It's no doubt it's about the trust that we've established with landowners. It's really a really practical, co-funded model and that support. Really strong uptake across the catchments and that whole sort of partnership delivery model. It's also meant that in that partnership aspect, we work obviously closely with MPI, but also with other regional councils, and for that matter too, it really helps with other industry groups, the likes of Hiranui District Land Care Group and things like that. It's all part of the mix of the approach that we take. So, in essence, SCAR is about stabilising vulnerable land. It's about reducing sediment and risk at source. It's about protecting those productive soils and building that long-term resilience. And those benefits are all cumulative over time and just get stronger and stronger. Yeah. As far as where we are now, so as I said earlier, we've got about another 14 months to go in this funding period, the second 4 year. The MPI have just opened last week for applications to the next funding round. So we're just in the process of assessing that at the moment. There is a little bit of a shift from their part in terms of the outcomes that they're looking at, but just looking to align ours with those. But I'd have to say, in summary, we're probably pretty well placed for the future. So again, just to kind of sum up the key benefits here, it's a proven model where we're delivering at scale, really strong landowner engagement. The outcomes are obviously lasting ones, and we're certainly building capability and resilience in the community. The leveraging of the investment obviously allows us to do things at scale, and as I mentioned before, we're very well positioned for the future. Okay, yeah. So that brings that part to a conclusion. But yeah, any questions at all?
Yes, we do have a number. John Faulkner, followed by Peter Scott, Genevieve and Claire.
Thanks, Andrew and Mark. It's probably not more a question, it's more an observation as I'm on the Hiranui Land Care Group and been involved in SCAR to some limited extent for a while. And the success is driven in one manner only, and it's the quality of the people on the ground. The people in ECAN that are doing the relationship building is exceptional, and I haven't heard a bad thing about them, and that's something that probably you alluded to gently, but it should be shouted loudly. I don't. The hill country and dryland farmers are notorious in their desire just to get on and do things, and engagement is really difficult, and the engagement has been absolutely fantastic. So, if anybody gets an opportunity to go and meet with the guys on the ground, Sam and co, you should really do it.
Thank you. Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. That's a good news story. I remember when at its inception, how much enthusiasm was there, and it's good to see that it's lasted through to this time. And I think we should be really pleased with the work that you're doing and others within ECAN are doing. My question is about the retired land and the management of that retired land. Once it's retired, is there management takes place, or just does it revert to like native?
In some cases, there is some planting that's done to complement what's there, but in most cases, it's actually left to revert on its own. But it's obviously fenced off, and that's how our funding in those instances contributes towards the fencing. Yep. Yep.
Genevieve.
I know no question is daft, but mine sort of sounds a bit daft. With regards to poplar, why poplar? And I've got one more after that sort of tacks on.
Certainly, it is a good question. It's obviously a frequent one. So to start, I'd have to say that the poplar poles as such, it's because of their rapid growth and the fact of their root system, stabilise the hills very quickly. The hills, there's certain versions that we use, or varieties rather, and they're sterile, so you're not going to get a problem with them spreading in that sense. It's also because of the pastoral land that a lot of this goes on. If you were to put in natives, then effectively you're putting in fodder for stock. That said, part of this is this poplars can be a nursery crop to stabilise the hill that you can then in time plant natives. Yeah, so it's because it's that kind of comes back to that thing about putting the right tree in the right place for the right reason. Yeah.
I remember going up to Kaikoura a couple of years ago. Actually, we went around some of the sort of exemplar models, I guess, of what was going on, and they were great to have a look at. I totally recommend it. I guess, though, when we talk about results, is it too early to actually gauge how successful this is, and with regards to holding back sediment and things, or are we seeing it already?
The reality is, to fully stabilise the hill, you're probably looking at sort of 7 to 10 years to start doing that. But the best way to do that is to see so this program has been in place with MPI for 20 years. And certainly when you see I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers, but when you see the results that we've seen on field trips up north and stuff, you see entire hillsides that look like that are now still in place, and the trees are very mature. Yep.
Claire.
Mine's not a question either. So, sorry, guys. Look, really, thanks for bringing this to us, Mark and Andrew. And I know for those of us sat here before, it is a review, but it's a really pertinent one, because I do think it's a classic example of non-regulatory work. And as John Faulkner mentioned, it's around that relationship building, the trust, and having the right people on the ground that can actually get that trust. So once again, it supports the catchment group work and the idea of community work and people buying in to get in better environmental outcomes, and not always the need to go in with a heavy regulatory hand, so to speak. And I just think that there's so much that's actually come out of this, because I went up to Kaikoura after the earthquake in 2000. It was one of my first visits away from here. My car driver's not in the room, thank God, but anyway, but yeah, and to think that we actually didn't go in there, we didn't need to go into Kaikoura with a plan, because part of the funding that was associated with this, MPI came at that time, was to do some mapping and some farm environment plans and things around the Kaikoura farms. So that's another example, and this was, I think, the second one that actually was actioned in our region. So thank you for bringing it to us as an update. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, followed by Nettles.
Thank you, Chair. That's great. Thank you for this opportunity to see what is happening out on the ground, because, I had Hawke's Bay Regional Council experience in land management, and, of course, they plant a lot of poplars, as you're probably aware, and something that really came to light when we were there and looking at the more mature stands of poplar that were on farms, because they've been doing it for a while, was the amount of trees falling over and breaking and snapping and causing debris, and of course they would end up in rivers and downstream. So, and we all know Cyclone Gabriel had a lot of debris. So it's really with these trees, I think, is there a silvicultural management plan for them, because they do need silviculture, and also they can be another source of income. Like if they were coppiced, the roots stay alive, and yet the timber could be used. So there's sort of different regimes that perhaps you could look at in the management of them, and also, I don't know if they could be used for fodder as well. So that's just a conversation around the management of them. Thank you.
I'd say that's not something that's been placed yet in the program, but certainly can be looked at going forward. Remember that we're sort of 7-8 years in. Those stands are not quite that mature yet, but yeah, certainly take that on board. And you're right, some of them have at times been used for, parts of them, so we say branches used for fodder and things, yeah. Perhaps I might also just come back to Claire's point before about what we've been able to do on farm, is because by getting, shall we say, a few credits into the bank account, it means that we're also in that position to, when we do see regulatory issues, to approach those with the landowners before the genie gets out of the bottle, so to speak. Yeah. So.
Thank you. Final question from Nettles.
Thank you. What is the life cycle of a poplar? I'm interested, are we looking at one and done, or is it a program that will replicate over every third decade or something?
I'd have to say I'm not 100% sure. We can come back to you on that though. But I think it's decades. But yeah, it certainly is something to, as with any crop, it needs to be considered. Yeah.
I'm sure we can. One last short one, Sarah.
Have you looked at trialling Kānuka, because it's a fairly fast-growing species up in our valley? It's growing quite fast. It is a stabiliser in gullies.
I don't believe that we have, but that doesn't mean it's not in the mix, and we can certainly again connect with other regional councils to see what they've trialled.
Great. Thank you, Andrew and Mark. It is exciting to see those works, as we sort of said, and I guess the comments you've had from councillors along the way, what can be achieved with really good communication, good people on the ground, and just seeing those actions flow. So thank you. Our next presentation is a briefing on Drinking Water Action Plan update. Taflin, Cam and Elaine and Ian, maybe.
Thank you, councillors. So this is just bringing you a quick update on the Drinking Water Action Plan. So we have a Drinking Water Action Plan. The previous iteration of the Regional Delivery Committee approved that plan back in September. We did bring you a couple of pieces on this in December. We appreciate that the timing of year and the fact that some of the councillors were new and being inducted at pace at that point. So you may not recall everything that was in that and what we brought back to you. So this is an update for where we are currently. But of course, if you've got other questions, then please feel free to raise them. Because this is a drinking water action plan, you can appreciate that it crosses a number of teams. So we've got Ian Leatham, who's leading the comms and engagement on it, Elaine Moriarty, who's leading the science, and Cam, who's leading the strategy on it. So there'll be a little bit of a tag team between them as well. But what we wanted to do was give you an update today. Partly because, as mentioned in the Regional Delivery Committee meeting just now, we do have one of our strategic CE who is with the rural sector tomorrow, where we'll be sharing this same information. So we'd value your feedback on this today as well, in terms of what other questions it raises for you, because that will help us for tomorrow. But also we wanted to make sure you'd got visibility of whatever we're taking outside as well as we get it. So with that, I will hand over to Cam.
Excellent. Thank you, Teflon, and good afternoon. So I will quickly head to this next slide. So we're coming here today because we've essentially completed stage one of this Drinking Water Action Plan, which is really around strengthening the evidence base that we have on this. But first, I just want to give you a quick overview of what the Drinking Water Action Plan is. It has been a couple of months since we brought this to you. And so this is focused on supporting drinking water outcomes in the short term for both community supplies and domestic self-supplies. And importantly, it's weighted towards domestic self-supplies. And you're going to hear a few kind of phrases here. Domestic self-supplies, or households relying on their own drinking water supply via private wells. So we use those a little bit interchangeably, but through legislation they are kind of framed as domestic self-supplies. And while we're focusing on these, is that the scale of this issue is less understood. And you may recall when we previously talked to you on this matter, there are a number of kind of monitoring, testing and reporting requirements that apply to community supplies, so water supplies that are feeding but are fueling multiple households and particularly over 25 people. But we don't know so much about the individual households relying on their private wells, and so this is where this work is focused. And there are less regulatory backstops in place for these supplies. So there's no reporting requirements on them, there's no testing requirements on them. And this is where the council decided to take a bit of a leadership role here. There's a number of different parties that play in the drinking water space. If you particularly think about the Water Services Authority, Taumata Arawai, you think about territorial authorities, and they play a particular role with regard to providing drinking water through those community supplies. As a regional council, managing land use and the effects of that. And you also have public health as well. So there's a number of different parties, but with regard to these private households and private wells, the council decided to take a leadership role and actually try to undiscover if there's an issue here, if we can do any work to support better drinking water outcomes. So the plan has three key phases and sits alongside our ongoing communications, engagement and compliance work. So we are going to talk about some of the strengthening the evidence-based work today. This morning at the RDC meeting, you heard from Jennifer Rochford, who talked about some of the compliance work that we're doing within drinking water protection zones. And we also have some of people in Andrew's team and Mark's team and land management advisors focusing on some of the work up catchment from drinking water protection zones as well. And so there's a lot of work happening in the space, but today we're really going to focus on some of the outputs of the science work that we've been doing. So just before we get into that work, there were three key components to the strengthening evidence component, phase one. So we now have estimates of the number and location of households that depend on self-supplied drinking water wells, and so that was step one. We now, however, updated risk maps of nitrate in Canterbury groundwater, so that was step two. And so what they have allowed us to do is move into that third bullet there. So now we have an understanding of how many domestic self-supplies, so how many households relying on their own drinking, have their own private well, are in those elevated and high-risk areas. And Elaine's going to talk to that now.
So, kia ora koutou. this is work that was done within the science team and public health and forensic science, also known as ESR previously. And they did work using satellite imagery and our wells database to try and estimate how many households in Canterbury were on this self-supply. And for that, we excluded Banks Peninsula from our assessment because anybody who's on their own water supply out there is typically river water or roof water as opposed to groundwater. With that, we have estimated provisional numbers of about 20,000 households in Canterbury are serviced by their own drinking water wells. And we have broken down some of the numbers here for you, with the highest numbers being in Selwyn of 6,000 households, Waimakariri 4,500, and in the Ashburton district of approximately 3,000 households. Yeah. Thank you. Kia ora. And as Cam said, we have updated the risk maps, and this work was carried out by our scientists at Environment Canterbury. And they have looked at the concentration of nitrate that we detect in our shallow groundwater wells. Just to explain what we mean by shallow groundwater, it is wells where the groundwater table is less than 40 metres below ground level. So you could still be quite far down before you hit the water table, and then we sample it. It's just how deep it is, the groundwater itself. We've done a few changes with this in that we have a couple of more categories of risk where we've become more nuanced with it with the more data we now hold. We have our high risk areas, our elevated, moderate and low, and finally unknown risk. And firstly, the unknown risk area, they're typically areas where we have very little data. And the reason for that is we may not have any aquifers that we know are present and or a very, very sparse population base there. So you can see the high risk areas are areas where the nitrate concentrations in the shallow groundwater are likely to exceed the MAV. Elevated, or areas where samples are generally over 50% of the MAV for nitrate, and some samples actually approach or exceed the MAV. Our moderate risk areas are where nitrate in groundwater will generally be lower than 50% of the MAV. If you remember, the MAV is 11.3. I always get 3 and 6 mixed up, thank you, is half of that. And finally, in our low risk areas, most of that shallow groundwater is less than 3 milligrams per litre. Now, this work is currently going through its final stages of peer review, and once it is available, we'll share it with Council. So, when we're putting all of these pieces of information together, we then can overlay where the high risk zones in Canterbury for nitrate and shallow groundwater. And then the next layer on this is where do we know other households using shallow groundwater? And therefore we can provisionally estimate how many households are consuming potentially groundwater that is high in nitrates. And what's important to know with this and these figures when we look at them, this does not take any treatment into consideration which individual households may have. Estimates on those numbers and things like that are further down into our plan. So these are the water that they are sourcing. So of the approximate 20,000 households I said at the beginning that we think are on their own supply of groundwater, we have the highest number of potentially high risk in the Ashburton district at 535, followed by 6 households we estimate in Selwyn and 23 in Timaru. And as you can see, the numbers going across. If we look at the elevated risks, it's Selwyn which comes up the highest there, followed by the Ashburton district. Just going to say with that unknown risk as well, it's some areas we don't have data and some areas where there are no aquifers in order to have any samples taken from. If over time we feel that those areas are becoming populated or of interest to us, we will of course include them in our groundwater monitoring schemes if needed. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Elaine. So this is the final slide, and we can break for questioning after this. So this provides us with a really good understanding of kind of where those elevated high-risk areas are and how many households are accessing drinking water via private wells in those areas. What it doesn't do, and what we are doing next, is looking to understand how many of these households have effective treatment systems in place. And what I mean by that is kind of at-home treatment systems that might remove nitrate, but also whether or not they are kind of maintaining those systems. But we're also, through this work, going to be understanding kind of drivers for putting systems in place, or kind of constraints for putting in systems in place, just to understand why people have made their decision or not made a decision to put an effective treatment system in place. So we're not contacting all of those households. We have identified 6 sample areas across elevated and high-risk areas that we're going to use. Approximately about 500 houses, 500 properties we'll be contacting. And we will be inviting them to undertake a short survey on drinking water testing and treatment systems, and we're looking to initiate this next month in March. We're also doing some communications, and I'll let Ian talk to that.
Sure. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I might just talk briefly too on the survey. I'll just fill in some gaps there for you if you have some questions. So the survey is essentially speaking to the part of the Drinking Water Action Plan that's investigating options around the uptake of nitrate removal treatment. That's for domestic self-supplies. Just what we do with that information, Cam is probably best to speak to that, how that information will be brought to you and why. But regarding the approach of the survey itself, so look, it's going to be a very quick, very simple, anonymous survey. It'll be a postcard type mail out linking to a survey page. Look, all we want to do here is we want to get a very general but sufficiently robust snapshot of the likes of, okay, are you testing? Yes or no? If yes, how often and what for? If no, why not? Is it an awareness issue? Is it you don't care? Is it you don't know how to test? So is it an education thing? Likewise with treatment, are you treating? Yes, no. If yes, how are you treating and what for? The treatment type. What was your motivation to decide to start treating? If no, why not? Again, is this an awareness thing? Is it perhaps you're not concerned? Or something we'd be particularly interested to know is there a barrier to entry? Is there something that you would like to test, like to treat, I beg your pardon, your water supply, but there's some sort of barrier there. There's something that's not getting you across the line. We're currently, Cam mentioned, we'd probably be looking to hit about 500 households. We're currently finalising those specific locations and numbers. We're aiming at almost certainly likely to hit end of March to be going out with the survey, and it'll be open for probably about 2 weeks. So I'll move then just straight into the campaign part. So, look, the campaign, I guess it's ticking certain boxes here. It's obviously ticking the box of the Drinking Water Action Plan itself. That's to deliver an awareness campaign to high-risk areas. But we also see it as an opportunity to welcome in other authorities and industry groups into this collective matter, the collective matter of drinking water and nitrate. But also, I see this campaign also as perhaps ticking one of the boxes from the last council's notice of motion around a nitrate emergency, that being for the council to take a leadership role in this space. So look, I won't go into a lot of detail. We have a plan where we've just started the building phase. We're looking at a delivery in April. But look, what I would say is, look, it's a complex issue, but look, I'm keeping this relatively straightforward. I'm not going to overcomplicate this. This is about just raising the awareness of those in those high-risk areas. Probably one thing I will mention that would almost certainly include a information pack of sorts along the lines of, look, we're contacting you because, and that because being, okay, the good excuse to contact you is the new nitrate risk maps and that report. Here's what you need to know. This is when we'd bring in the health authorities with what the research says, what the current position is, explaining what is a MAV, etc. Then here's what you can do, your testing, your good practice, borehead health, that kind of thing, treatment options, and this is again an opportunity to potentially bring an industry here. But we'd also like to, for each landowner, tell perhaps in that pack a little bit of a story of the district. So here's your current state, and be very, very honest about here's your current state and here's what the roadmap looks like. So here's what you might reasonably expect in the coming weeks, months, years. So that's one aspect of it.
Thank you, and I'll just close off with some next steps here. So so tomorrow this information has been taken to the CE sector hui. That was referred to at the Regional Delivery Committee this morning, and that's part of the Chief Executive taking that leadership role with the broader sector. We continue to engage with territorial authorities on this and Taumata Arawai and keep them abreast of what we're up to. And I think I referred previously that Taumata Arawai, the Water Services Authority, is very interested because this is an issue that they're looking at kind of nationally, and they're very interested in kind of how we kind of roll out and what we find from a Canterbury perspective. Then we'll come back to you in April, and so within April we'll have better information on how many effective systems are in place, and kind of drivers or barriers to uptake of those. And so we'll be seeking advice from you on next steps at that stage, which might include where do we go to next with regard to supporting increased facilitation of treatment uptake in those high risk and elevated areas.
Great. So little time and so many people wanting to ask a question. Unfortunately, you've all drawn the sticker says no questions today, therefore we have no questions. First off, John Faulkner, followed by Ashley.
Thank you, everybody. One of the key points of information that we got when we were doing the zone committee is that if you reduce water in a drain, the concentration will increase. And we all discussed that, and we went to spray irrigation, and yes, water decreased in the drain, but the concentration also increased. Now, my question is in regards to the weather patterns we're having at the moment. We've talked about aquifer recharge as being a potential source of reducing the impact of nitrates. Now, are we going to get some update on the possibility of that happening with the weather events we're having at the moment? Is there a possibility that the volume of water that's been deposited on Canterbury is going to create a pulse that will flush some of the nitrates out and perhaps reduce the concentration levels?
Through the chair, I think there could be twofold. I think, yes, when you decrease the volume of water, the concentration of nitrate goes up. With the rain event, I would expect us to see actually a spike of nitrates happening in our groundwater as a result of it. If some of our previous triennium councillors remember the work we did in Burnham, one of our sample events was following the previous flood in May or June, that we saw a peak coming through. And then over time, all of our groundwater aquifers are high to average at the moment. They're all looking really healthy in terms of water available. So that flood event will wash an awful lot from the soils down into our aquifer, nitrogen that's been held at the root zone at the moment. So in terms of managed aquifer recharge and that, I think that's probably another day's discussion to discuss the benefits of that, if I could bring that to you another day, maybe.
Microphone, please.
You answered the question. I'm not asking about managed aquifer recharge. It's whether there would be a pulse. I understand that the end would get washed into the system, but is there sufficient water then to push it out afterwards? So it's getting the data to see how that tracks over time.
Thank you, Ashley. And if I could just ask people to have one question, we do have a large number of people.
First of all, I want to say thank you. This is brilliant. This actually sheds a whole lot of light on what's going on. My question is around communications. So there's about 8,000 households there that are in moderate to high, and you're only going to be directly contacting around 500 of them. Given the slightly changed maps, which means that some people might not know precisely what area they're in anymore, and there may be new residents moved into areas, are you going to be doing a more broad communications campaign outlining the new maps and perhaps directing people to this information when it's public so that those who you don't contact can easily know where to find out more information and what to do about it?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, absolutely. So these maps themselves, we will be doing some communications work around that, absolutely. But I think it's important to look at this whole thing too as an ongoing project. So I've mentioned the communications campaign that will run for a short period, but the reality is there's going to be ongoing communications around this. So the supplementary work we'd be doing would be things like an evergreen landing page, which would be along the lines of, so you're in an elevated district, or you're in an elevated zone, here's what you need to know. So look, short answer is yes. Look, this is an ongoing thing, and absolutely, we're very keen to share all relevant information. And actually, that's one of the reasons why we're working increasingly closer now with industry. So Taflin's got her CEO group that she's working with. I've got a comms managers group in industry that I'm working with, and one of the endeavours there is to ensure that we are sharing information and assisting each other where we can. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Genevieve.
I agree with Ashley. It's actually great, but not great to see it in front of you in detail. And my main query, and Elaine, just you were talking about the unknown risk factor, that column of 2626, and you were saying that there's very little data held for that cohort because of sparse population or no data testing wells. Is that right? So, yeah, I'll hear that.
Through the chair, I'll explain that better. Apologies, Councillor Robinson. Since I prepared these slides, the team have updated the numbers for me, and I can give you a little bit of more nuance in them. So out of those 2,626 approximate households, only 284 households, we estimate, are really households where we don't know the risk that they face. Apologies. The majority of them lie in areas that are outside of where there are aquifers. So therefore, such as Banks Peninsula, which isn't included in this, but other areas in Canterbury that we know there are no aquifers there. We know there's 3,700 approximate households there on their own supply. The most likely source they have is roof water, which comes with its own set of risks and benefits. We estimate approximately 280 households. We don't know their risk. They are typically very sparsely populated areas of Canterbury where, for several reasons, we don't have groundwater wells there. And if in the future we needed to determine the risk for there, we could absolutely start some testing or look at drilling and things like that.
It is collectively part of this, which is do we need further ground wells in some of these areas to do our own testing rather than relying on private wells?
Through the chair, my sense is we don't currently know. We have over 350 wells, I think, currently, plus there are several other operators that have wells that we can use their information for. And at the moment, we do review our monitoring network, but currently I'm relatively happy with it.
Andrea.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you so much. I'm very proud of this. It's wonderful. And as we all know, it's not just us here in New Zealand with this problem. So have you guys had a look around the internet overseas, what everyone else is doing to protect their people? The private well, come to our landing page, order a kit.
I can, and Cam probably has some as well. I personally have. I'm probably a bit biased that I've looked at a lot of what's happening in Europe, but I know from some of our groundwater scientists in our team have worked in states in America where they have similar issues, similar landing pages, slightly different funding mechanisms there whereby they are funded to either drill an alternative source or source alternate drinking water supplies where that provision isn't currently in New Zealand.
Claire, followed by Ian.
Thank you, through your chair. Thanks for the update. And I know these are estimated figures, and that's the best, I guess, we can expect. But I guess I have some reservations when we start adding it onto survey responses. So therefore you have an estimate multiplied by the survey response to get some sort of figure. It could actually become nonsense in a way. So I'm just really got some real reservations of how that figure might be actually used. I wonder, and I have no problem with going out and sampling six areas and collecting some information from 6 areas, 500 homes. And I wonder whether a face-to-face approach might be something that you would consider. And I've got a summer student, which I know would be next summer, not this summer gone. But I just wonder whether there's more information that you could collect. In addition to what you're talking about, Ian, I think that in New Zealand we know that on a lifestyle block, 4 hectares, 1 house, 1 well. But on a lot of our rural land, our bigger blocks, there could be multi-houses, 1 well. And it just, I think that my fear is that inaccuracy upon inaccuracy is going to be crap. So...
Thank you, through you, Chair. So that's a really good question that's been front of mind for us when we've been designing the survey, how to get some reach, how to meet an April timeframe. We're not going to get a statistically representative sample, but we do want to get some responses that will inform next steps. So we talked about the survey work. There's 2 mechanisms being explored at the moment. One, well, not being explored. We've landed on we want to have a mail drop to these particular properties, but we're also exploring the use of an external group to make contact in one of the sample areas via either phone call or face-to-face door knocking, just to see if we can make sure we do get the responses and see if there's richer information to come from that. So that's absolutely front of mind. We will have to see how we go over March, and part of the advice to you in April might be we need further information to actually understand if, it will really depend on what information we do gather through March. But we are looking to have a bit of a belts and braces approach, both the mail out and some face-to-face or phone calls.
If I could just add something to that too, as Ian said, in terms of using that communications group from the sector as well. So what we will have an ask of those CEs in terms of actually helping us with this, because we do know that there is a bit of a low trust in terms of sharing the information with Environment Canterbury and what are we going to do with that information. So by definition, we think it needs to be an anonymous survey, but it also needs to be robust enough. Do we need enough numbers to be able to use it to bring back to help inform next steps or decision making? So we will be asking those groups to help share, pass the word, if you like, and we would accept that help willingly from councillors as well, in terms of your networks, to show that actually the more information we gather, the better informed your next decisions can be in terms of what the next steps are.
Thank you. Ian, followed by Nick Moody. And we are running out of time.
Well, I'd just like to make a comment. I think I'm really concerned about this campaign and this program. I think you're in real danger of misleading the public. And I look at your map and I can see significant inaccuracies in your classification of groundwater. And I know this from a large-scale basis of the quality of groundwater in our area. And I also I think you're at risk of being accused of playing politics with your classification of the difference between high risk, elevated risk, and moderate risk. Because I would suggest that if you're 50% below the MAV, which is 50% below the World Health Authority standards, that there's a very low risk of health issues from potable water, and so I think you've got the classification wrong. I think you're highly likely to be elevating a degree of hysteria about this, and I reflect back on when the nitrate issue was driven out of the Christchurch councillors. We were going into an election process for local government. All the feedback from the rural areas, especially in mid-Canterbury, which has got some of the highest groundwater nitrates, was, what the hell are you on about? Because we understand our nitrates, we understand the health risk probably better than most of the politicians who are trying to make it hysterical, and yet this program seems to be destined to continue to push that line. So have you thought about the risk of what you're proposing here in terms of the inaccuracy of your classification, the inaccuracy of your groundwater mapping, and the effect it's likely to have on our communities in terms of anxiety?
Jeff, if you just let me, thank you, Councillor McKenzie. As a starter, I'll just note that I back the staff fully in the context of this. It is not inaccurate, and Councillor, you are well aware that we have been working on nitrate issues for well over a decade, which is where our freshwater plans come from. And the nitrate levels within those frameworks do vary, as does the national direction from those. And I do appreciate your comments around MAV. I'll also add that this council in the previous triennium, through the notice of motion, gave direction to myself and the staff to deliver on an action plan with regard to nitrates. This is the next step in over a decade of work. So I will not have my staff answer the question in terms of a direction that this is inaccurate. It is not inaccurate. In terms of concerns about risk and how we might manage that response, Taflin, perhaps you could answer that.
Yep. Thank you, Stephanie. Yep, and I was just wanted to acknowledge that yes, we have done a great deal of consideration around the risks and the pros and cons of the different approaches. So I just wanted to give that assurance.
Apologies to everyone else who has their name down. We have run out of time, but cheers. Wiggs, you had a question.
No, my comment was in a way similar to Ian, and I just have in the back of my mind the Blythe River thing that we had, and when SNAs went with district councils and how that was communicated. It really does come down to a communication issue when you put things on a map, and what that means for both where people live, what that means for like Taumata Arawai will have to sort of intervene if you're going above those kind of things. So there's a lot of legal stuff here, and I just want to make sure that we're really on that. And I've heard some reassurance, but I do take heed to what Ian has said, because that is in the back of my mind. We have been burnt before, so it's just, I know that is there.
Thank you, and again, apologise for those last three questions that have not been answered. You can certainly email them. So thank you, Taff and team, for this last presentation on the drinking water. We're back in again at 3:15 for our final presentation workshop on PT Network Optimisation Route 44. 10-minute break and we start again.
Kia ora. Okay, here to talk about optimization and the reliability of Route 44. So, key purpose. Want to tell you about our proposals to address reliability on this route and seek your support to take our recommended option to public consultation. And once consultation is complete, you will get the opportunity to make a formal decision on changes to the services. A few of you have probably seen this slide before as a wee reminder of the context under which we operate. So starting with central government priorities have been made very clear. There's an expectation that we optimize our routes, that we review our high subsidy routes, that we increase private revenue, and that we go for patronage growth. Funding, obviously quite constrained for us at the moment, so really trying to see what we can do within our existing resources, our existing fleet. We do have some budget available for low-cost improvements. Our communities have been very, very clear to us over the years. Reliability and frequency are the two things that they value most. Connections, journey times, also important to them. And finally, our regional public transport plan, which prioritises patronage over coverage, affordability and emissions reductions. So this is Route 44, runs from Westmoreland through to Darlington. Financially, this is a really high-performing route for us, so fourth most financially efficient in terms of the subsidy per passenger trip, and one of our best for private revenue. We've seen really good growth on this route post-COVID, but that has started to drop away. Pretty certain the reason for that is the lack of reliability, and that is becoming an increasing problem for the route. You see the bar chart at the bottom of the slide that really demonstrates how it performs compared to our average, and that 20% of northbound journeys being more than 10 minutes late is pretty poor. So when we've prioritised routes for optimisation, this one has come up very strongly as by far the worst in terms of reliability and in terms of the fact that a lot of people are affected because it is a well-used route. Reasons for reliability. Primarily, we've got a loop at one end of the service. When we run a loop, that prevents us from putting layover in. So we've got no recovery time at one end of the route. The timetable's out of date, the traffic conditions have changed, we simply need to update that. And we've got an absence of effective bus priority, particularly Colombo Street southbound in the PM peak is a bit of a killer for this one. Our customers know that this route is very unreliable. That's not surprising. It's really stark when you look at these figures. We just picked a couple of routes with similar characteristics, and you'll see we get significantly more complaints per passenger than we do on the other routes. And these complaints are predominantly about the reliability of the route. So it is having a real impact on our customers today. So what we want to do, we want to remove the Westmoreland loop and just operate on one side of that. That will allow us to have a terminus and put layover time, recovery time into the route. That will improve the reliability. We want to update the timetable, update the journey times, again, improve the reliability. There's an opportunity for us to extend this route into Preston's. That will improve accessibility to the service. We think there's a good opportunity to grow patronage there. And we want to extend the operating hours and the weekend frequency and align this route with the policies in the RPTP for a route of this type. Now, to do this in isolation would be a cost of about 1.6 mil per annum. Putting the optimization lens on this, there's an opportunity to reduce that cost by about half if we can withdraw the 135. The route that we're proposing, particularly between the Palms and Prestons, would duplicate a significant portion of the 135 route. And the 135 is one of our poorest performing routes. That subsidy of $15 per passenger trip is very, very high. 145 passengers per day use is very, very low. So to put this into context, Route 44 has a passenger subsidy of about $3.60 per passenger, and we carry about 1,200 passengers per day. We've had a bit of a deep dive into what impact removing the 135 would have, who would be affected, etc. And we think we can mitigate a large proportion of the impact through two changes. One is to extend the school service 666 through to Marine Parade. Now, we've already done that. We wanted to put that change in place for the start of the school year, and the cost was pretty marginal, so we've already gone ahead with that change. The other one is to extend Route 100 into Darlington, so that's to pick up the area the 44 used to serve before we make our proposed change. And then that would pick up that area of the community who would no longer have access to the 44. So what we're recommending, changes to the route, the timetable, the frequency of the 44 that I've been through. Recommending removing the 135 and reusing the two buses that operate on that service to put on the 44. Extending the 100 to Darlington to fill that gap left by the 44. And the school service extension, which we've already put in place. So there's always going to be trade-offs with optimization. 1,500, 2,000-ish residents in South Prestons will now have access to public transport that didn't have before. 4,100 residents now connected to the CBD. So I think it's important to recognise, the 44 is clearly a route that people want to use. The evidence is clear. We can provide a much better route through the 44. And obviously reliability, connectivity, we're hoping we can address that drop in patronage on the 44 and keep a high-performing route. And the disbenefits from 27 boardings per day that we cannot mitigate through the school service extension or the 100 extension. And so the estimated cost for this would be $800 grand a year. That's within our existing budgets, and that would be 51% funded by NZTA through our continuous program. There are...
Just ask a question there, because I think it's on a bunch of mine. So if we just go back to that slide, so there's a social cost and a loss of ability, but you believe that the extensions and shifts and changes leave you with a net loss of about 27 boardings a day. So with all the reorganisation, in a numeric sense, very, very minimal, the loss of service to people and social cost associated. Is that how I should read that?
Yes, that's spot on.
Thank you.
We wanted to put a couple of alternative options on the table. So we've got our top option, the recommended option. An alternative would be to go with the recommended option, but not to extend the operating hours. That saves quite a big chunk of cost. It would not align with our RPTP policies, though. So to connect a route, and we have policies that say it should run till whatever time at night. I think it's 11. And so that would be out of whack with the policy. Second alternative, which we wouldn't recommend, is to put in the 44 changes we've talked about, plus the 100 change, without removing the 135. I think that in reality, if we don't want to remove the 135, we probably need to go back to the drawing board, because we would be duplicating a large extent of the route with our proposed changes to the 44. So it kind of wouldn't make sense to do one without the other. So moving on for questions, you can see my question at the bottom of the slide.
Yes. Ashley has the first one. Well, I'm thinking of another one, followed by John Faulkner.
Okay, I can hear my various constituents' voices on either side going yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Prestons will love it. Dullington. This takes Dullington residents away, they don't have a particularly direct service anyway, but from looking at it, this means they're not going to the bus interchange at all. The Palms would become their interchange. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The 100 is a pretty good service. It runs on about a 20-minute headway. It's actually more frequent than the 44. But it would require a transfer at the Palms. But from the Palms, you do get Route 7, so the really high frequency. You've got the Orbiter. A lot of accessibility from the Palms.
Supplementary to that, at the moment, do you know, because I get some voices in my ear saying Dallington hasn't had a decent bus service since the earthquakes. I've had a few of those. Do we know how many people are actually alighting or getting on or getting off in the Dallington part of it, or do we not have that information?
Bear with me, I think I've got that. Yeah, so Darlington is the red blob at the bottom of the screen. So this is average daily boardings. You see we've got 11 kids, 14 full fare paying adults, 1 Super Gold card and 3 community services cards on average per day.
It's a chicken and egg situation really, isn't it? But yeah, that's great. Thank you.
John Faulkner.
Thank you for that. I went back to the previous question I asked about where's my bus question, and when we're looking at the optimisation, and I look at the further down the slot, there it is there. If I use my eyes, the areas that are no longer being serviced, and I thought, well, if I was a customer and I knew where a bus was coming from, it would alleviate a lot of the concern about losing a regular routed bus, because I would know the closest option to go to. And so my question is, what would the cost be for that service for customers, with AI technology and mapping and GPS? Surely it wouldn't be such an expensive option, or am I barking up a wrong tree?
To clarify, are we talking about the ability to see a bus in real time on a map?
As you can on Uber.
Yes, we already have that across our network. All our buses are tracked. So if you use either our portal or transit or anything like that, you can watch the bus coming down the road until it gets to you.
So I was given incorrect information before.
The confusion, and apologies, was that NTS does not include providing real-time information in the nature that you talked about, but that functionality is already provided on our network through other means.
Christian Dion.
Thanks for the work you've done, and it's always difficult trade-offs. That's the question we're really going to have to ask of the communities that we'll go out and talk to about this. But I've got if we go back the bus up a couple of steps, about the reason. Actually, God, I didn't even think of that. Sorry. Oh dear, I've put myself off. Stop it, Nick. What I'm trying to say, the reason that we're having this is the reliability of the 44 in the first place. So that's the reason we're discussing this in the first place, the reliability of the 44. Do you think that the changes that you're going to propose would be enough to make that service reliable? And is there any point in going to the City Council, who is the road controlling authority, at the same time and just reminding them, hey, look, we're having to make these trade-offs with your communities that are our communities because your bus prioritisation public transport network is not up to scratch in these areas? And also, is there any right turn issues in this route, or is that more just other routes?
Yes, it's a fair question. So I guess the biggest one for us is the lack of bus priority on Colombo Street, and CCC staff are currently working on that. Do not know the timescales yet for it going to their council. In terms of intersections, I can't tell you off the top of my head if there's any of particular concern, but as we do this optimization, we pick up on those and we do go straight to CCC. And of course, one of the things we're really keen to get is SCATs, so we get signal priority. Believe they are advancing that project.
Because the only reason I say that is that we're making calls at a governance level here. It's great that the staff are engaging with you, but I do think there's an opportunity while you're looking at this optimization of public transport for us to also have a communication with their governance and say, hey, look, we've done this bus priority X, Y, Z. And these are some of the issues that we've come up with so that you can think about that when you're doing your prioritisation of your own budgets.
Giles. Adds additional context to why we're doing this. So yes, primarily, as you've said, Chair, Council Chair, is around 44, but if you step back slightly more widely, we get a lot of requests from the community and from councillors to look at changes to routes to optimise. This is the first example consistent with the RPTP and the direction of government to look at high subsidy, good performing routes in the round, and recognising that there will always be trade-offs, there will always be perceived winners and losers. The question is, are we optimising the route? And this is the first step or first opportunity that will then flow into other opportunities on other parts of the network. If we have, if we have 200 buses, where are we best putting them to get the optimal outcome consistent with regional policy, government direction? And that then leads us to, well, a great opportunity with the 44, which is a popular route already, but we can make it better with minimal impact, not wanting to belittle the impact, but with minimal impact on a much smaller part of the community.
Thank you. Andrea. You're fine. Claire.
My question might be a bit odd, but just thinking about how we pick up, and I'm not sure whether you're going to go through the rest of the slides or they're just there for you to pop into for questions. How we pick up those people, the 27, particularly if people can't walk to a bus or maybe they can drive to a bus or something. Is there options for park and ride or something like that as well? I mean, are there other options that we can mix and match a little bit? Could be encouraging the City Council to play a part. And I have another question through to you.
So this is a slide where we've tried to demonstrate what mitigation we can and can't do. So school buses can provide mitigation for the school kids, so we've got that in green. The Super Gold Card users, they will have the option of total mobility. Now we know that's it's not a free option. It's could be more expensive depending on your destination, and the subsidy for that is reducing to 65%, I think, from June. Ultimately, if we take both school kids and Super Gold off this, we're left with about 14 users that we cannot mitigate through any reasonable means that we know of, and it's 27 if you include the Super Gold. So I guess from my position, I'd say there's limits to what we can do, and this is one of the trade-offs.
So my second question goes back to the total mobility, and I had a thought that this was in PX. I didn't ask it this morning, but or this earlier today, but I probably can. And Stuart, you talked about the 5 criteria. So, and I did actually look up the criteria myself last night. I didn't get the feel of just because the bus can't come to you or you don't have a bus stop close by that made you eligible. So is it the fact that just because, even though you might have full mobility, but a kilometre might be too far to walk. I'm just wondering how a Supergold user can access total mobility, because I'm not sure that fits with my providing total mobility thinking.
Yeah, it's a good question, Claire, and I think that's one of the factors that's been considered in the Ministry of Transport's review. So the current eligibility tests are relatively broad. We have customers, total mobility customers, who can walk. I had this conversation just the other day in Ashburton with the operator down there. So he talked to me about a customer who can walk from their house into the town centre of Ashburton, but can't walk back because he's done his dash. And so there are customers who have some mobility, but not consistent mobility. And that meets the criteria for total mobility. And if we think about Ashburton, they actually don't have public transport in Ashburton. So this idea that it's only for folk who can't use an existing service, that's not actually true. But the Ministry of Transport is reviewing the criteria, and their intention behind reviewing the criteria is recognising the fact that this cohort in our community is going to grow over time, and that the costs are becoming unsustainable, and therefore something has to change to manage that. And one of the things the government are looking at changing is the eligibility criteria, such that the funding that is available is applied to those who need it most. And that's really about those who need it most being able to live their best lives through engagement with society, socially and economically, which means that some of our existing customers with total mobility would find themselves no longer eligible, and would have to come up with some other way of doing their trips.
Yeah.
Or just not do their trip, because we're talking about people who often can't work, if you're disabled mentally or physically. So that's why it's such a difficult issue, because you're saying, well, maybe, you can't go out, you're stuck in the house. That's all, just a comment.
Kia ora. Just in regards to Burwood Hospital, because of the 135 and the 7 go through there. Do we know? You take the kids out, and I suppose those are the gold card users and etc. Do we know the use of Burwood Hospital for those buses? I know it's quite hard. I'm just trying to think, because when I do see when I'm waiting for the 7, you see the 135, and it's as you know, it's not many on it, and that's why we're talking about this. But in the sense of thinking about, the Burwood Hospitals there, is it their destination, to and from? Just
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the information to hand. We've just looked at the areas that would no longer have service, whereas obviously Burwood has that access to Route 7, which is a really good route.
Another one is so all those school children or the ones classified as 135 and they'll go into school bus. Is that kind of looking at secondary school students and that what Avonside kind of Shirley bus, or
Yeah, it looks like it's predominantly the high school students.
The room has gone very quiet. I guess the the sentence under your question mark is, can we proceed with public consultation? So I guess we're not making a decision, are we? We're just saying, yes, continue. Is that the question that we're being asked? Do we have consensus in the room that we should continue with the consultation? Is there anyone against that thought? There are no one. There is no. Nah. So the answer is yes. Are there any further questions? Yeah. No. Yes, Sarah.
could we consult the? I'm just looking at Google Earth, and there's retirement homes close by on your route. Consult with those directly. Is that what you do?
Short answer is I don't actually know. I would need to pass that to my colleagues, but I'll certainly pass on the desire.
You could always put a brave person on that bus with armour and advise people of the possible change and see what their response is on the 135. Dion, you have a question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, are you going to, or are you intending to work with the community board, the Christchurch City Community Board in these changes? Obviously for two reasons, bus stops and excellent. No, that's good.
Recognising that there's a large, so the Prestons community currently don't have access to public transport, so we'll engage with them. And I think to refer to the earlier conversation is, in the conversations we have with the City Council officers, we are increasingly looking to join up consultation exercise, or as minimum be aware of the consultation exercises that are going on, so that there is a more unified approach with the community going forward.
Community boards are really useful for this type of stuff, so just, yeah.
Derek.
Yeah, just with regard to consultation, to let you know that the intent is that we join it up with the wider network review consultation that will be going on. So I think that's kind of May, June area.
That won't see it subsumed in a bigger question, or it's just my question. If it's targeted, then it's.
Yeah, I think it will be a subsection of the wider consultation. I think there's a concern about bombarding people with different and potentially conflicting consultations if we put it separately. So the intention is to wrap it together.
If there are no further questions or comments, thank you, Giles, Derek, Stuart, for your presentation and the conversation. We're coming to the end of the day. Councillor Mackay, would you like to finish with the...
Yep, will do. Kia hoa te marano, kia whakapapa pānamo te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou I te ringa nei. Alaha atu, alaha mai. Tātou I tātou katoa. Hui e take.
Thank you all.